The day the laughter dimmed. Have you ever wondered how someone who made the whole world laugh could quietly slip into the shadows of despair? Robin Williams, the man who lit up millions of lives, was hiding a monster inside. It wasn't depression. It wasn't just Parkinson's. It was something far more devastating. Today, for the first time, we'll take you on a journey told through the eyes of his wife, Susan Williams. Stay with us, because this story might save someone you love. Inside the strongest man I ever knew extended. There are moments in life so profound, so quietly powerful, that they imprint on your soul forever. For Susan Williams, one of those moments was simply looking into her husband's eyes. In the final months of Robin Williams' life, his eyes told stories words could no longer carry. They flickered with a confusion that seemed to fight against his once sharp mind. They held an apology that broke her heart, an apology for being someone he didn't understand anymore. And most haunting of all, they radiated a silent struggle. A man caught in a storm he couldn't name, trying to stay afloat in waters too deep and dark. Susan recalls, "I felt like I was the only person who truly saw what he was going through. The world saw the genius, the comedic firecracker, the beloved actor who could bounce between voices, characters, and jokes with supernatural ease. But Susan, she saw something else, something fragile, something sacred. She saw a man unraveling. It wasn't sudden. It came in gentle waves, at first forgotten lines, subtle stumbles in memory, a fleeting look of panic when he couldn't find the right words. But over time, the waves grew into crashing tides. He became restless at night, sometimes walking around the house with a dazed expression. Other times, he would freeze in place, as if trapped in a maze inside his own mind. He tried to hide it. God, did he try? Every morning, he would wake up and put on the mask, the smile, the charm, the light that the world expected from him. But the smile didn't reach his eyes anymore. Susan remembers how he would often retreat into their bedroom, sit quietly, and stare at nothing. She would sit next to him, gently placing a hand over his. Sometimes he would squeeze it back. Sometimes he wouldn't notice at all. There were moments when Robin broke down. No script, no performance, just raw, unfiltered emotion. He would cry in my arms. Susan whispers, her voice trembling, and he'd say, "I'm sorry. I don't know what's happening to me. I just want it to stop." And what could she say to that? How do you comfort the person who once made millions laugh when he himself is losing his own joy? She held him. That's all she could do. She held him like a mother holds a wounded child, like a friend refusing to let go, like a wife clinging to the man she vowed to stand by in sickness and in health. But nothing prepared her for this kind of sickness. A sickness with no name, no cure, no clear path forward. And yet, in all his fragility, Robin still showed moments of unbelievable strength. He never lashed out. He never turned cold. Even when the disease was stealing his identity piece by piece, he tried to protect Susan from it. He was the strongest man I ever knew, she says, because even when he was falling apart inside, he still worried about me, still asked if I was okay. That kind of love doesn't fade. It carves itself into your bones. And Susan, to this day, carries that love like a lighthouse, guiding her through grief, through silence, through the years that followed his passing. Robin Williams didn't just leave behind laughter. He left behind a love story filled with courage, vulnerability, and quiet heroism. The kind of story we rarely see behind the spotlight. the kind that matters most when the lights go down. Misdiagnosis. It wasn't just Parkinson's extended when Robin Williams received the diagnosis of Parkinson's disease in May 2014. It was like a curtain finally being pulled back, or so it seemed. At first, Susan Williams felt a strange kind of relief. A name had finally been given to the chaos they'd been quietly navigating for months. There was an explanation, a path forward, a framework they could try to understand. But in the deepest corners of her heart, something didn't sit right. I remember thinking, she said this doesn't explain everything. The forgetfulness, yes. The tremors, sure. But what about the crippling anxiety that came out of nowhere? The sudden paranoia, the hallucinations that left him staring at shadows, whispering things that didn't make sense. It was like watching someone slowly lose pieces of themselves, not just physically but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Parkinson's didn't quite fit, and yet it was the only label they were given. For Susan, each day became an emotional balancing act. She wanted to trust the doctors, some of the best minds in the world, but her intuition, the one honed through years of loving this man, deeply told her there was something more. Robin, too, seemed to sense it. He'd sit on the edge of their bed in the middle of the night and whisper, "What's happening to me, sus?" Sometimes his voice trembled like a frightened child's. Other times, it was flat, almost robotic. There were moments when he forgot the names of lifelong friends. He struggled to remember simple routines, how to make a cup of tea, where he put his keys, or what day it was. Then there were days he seemed completely fine, lucid, witty himself. These swings from clarity to confusion were emotionally draining and deeply disorienting. It felt like we were living with a ghost who came and went. Susan said, what made it worse was the helplessness. No treatment plan made sense. Medication for Parkinson's seemed to make things worse. Antidepressants didn't help the shadows lift. Therapy was futile. Robin couldn't always explain what was wrong. And still, the world expected him to smile. Behind closed doors, he was deteriorating. In public, he was still Robin Williams, beloved actor, comedian, father, husband. The weight of pretending only added to his exhaustion. Susan began keeping a journal, noting changes, logging patterns, documenting episodes. It wasn't about finding a cure. It was about surviving. But deep inside, she feared time was running out. She feared that by the time they figured out what was truly wrong, it would be too late. And tragically, she was right. It wasn't until the autopsy report came back that the real culprit was named dementia with Lewy body's DLB, a devastating neurodegenerative disease that mimics other conditions, often leading to misdiagnoses. For Susan, that moment was both crushing and clarifying. It explained everything, every panic attack, every delusion, every fragment of memory that slipped away. But it also meant that the fight had been against an invisible enemy, one they didn't even know existed until it had already won. There was some peace in finally knowing, Susan later said. But the guilt of not understanding sooner, of not being able to help him more, it still lingers. She doesn't blame the doctors, not really. Dementia with Lewy bodies is notoriously difficult to diagnose. Its symptoms overlap with Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, even schizophrenia. It's a master of disguise, but that doesn't make the loss any easier. What Susan hopes now is simple, that by sharing their misdiagnosis story, others might be spared the same confusion, the same heartbreak. That someone somewhere might ask one more question, dig a little deeper, trust their instincts a little more. Because sometimes what looks like one thing is really something else entirely. What is DLB, the monster behind the mask? Extended when Susan Williams heard the words dementia with Lewy bodies for the first time, it sounded like something out of a medical textbook, foreign, cold, and confusing. She had never heard of it. Robin hadn't either, and yet it was the very thing that had slowly, quietly stolen her husband's light. Dementia with Lewy bodies, DLB, is a rare and cruel condition. It's not just memory loss. It's not just shaking hands. It's not just occasional confusion. It is all of those and so much more. The disease is named after Friedrich Lewy, the scientist who first discovered abnormal protein deposits in the brains of people with dementia. These Lewy bodies build up in areas of the brain that control memory, thinking, movement, and even mood. Imagine your brain as a city. Each part has its own job. One area manages memory, another handles movement, another helps you understand emotions or form words. Now imagine if slowly and without warning, random streets in that city began to close down. Power starts flickering, traffic lights stop working, whole neighborhoods go dark. That's what DLB does. One day, you might wake up feeling like yourself. The next, you can't remember where you are. Or worse, you're seeing things that aren't there. That was Robin's life near the end. One moment, he'd be telling jokes sharp as ever. Minutes later, he'd be frozen in place, unsure of what day it was. He would reach for objects that weren't there, talk to people no one else could see. Dementia with Lewy is deceptive. It hides behind symptoms that look like other diseases. Doctors may think it's Parkinson's because of the tremors, or Alzheimer's because of the memory issues, or even depression or anxiety. It's called the great imitator for a reason. But DLB doesn't just imitate, it overwhelms. It causes vivid hallucinations, images so real the person can't distinguish fantasy from reality. It disrupts sleep in terrifying ways, leading people to act out their dreams, kicking, shouting, even trying to run. It affects blood pressure, bladder control, even vision. And worst of all, it progresses fast. There is no single test to diagnose DLB, no brain scan, no blood work, no clear answer until tragically after death. And there is no cure. That's what makes this disease so devastating for families. You watch someone you love vanish in pieces. One day, they're almost themselves. The next, a stranger in their own skin. Susan called it chemical warfare in the brain. A monster with 50 arms, each one triggering a different symptom, each one striking when you least expect it. She remembers feeling helpless, not because she didn't love Robin enough, but because she didn't know what they were fighting. And yet knowing the name, finally understanding the enemy, gave her a strange comfort. Not closure, but clarity. DLB is rare, but not invisible. It affects an estimated 1.4 million Americans. Most of them are over 60. Most of their families have never heard of it. That's why Susan speaks out. That's why stories like Robin's matter. Because knowledge is power. Understanding is hope. If you're noticing changes in a loved one, hallucinations fluctuating, attention, sudden physical stiffness. Ask questions. Don't settle for the first answer. Don't be afraid to seek a second opinion. Trust your instincts. DLB is a monster, but it's not unbeatable, not if we shine a light on it. And sometimes just having a name for the darkness is the first step toward healing. Fighting the invisible Susan's side of the battle extended. When you love someone deeply, you prepare yourself to stand by them through anything, illness, sorrow, loss. But nothing prepares you for a battle you cannot see. Nothing prepares you to fight a monster that keeps changing its face. That was the war Susan Williams found herself in. She wasn't just Robin's wife anymore. She had become his caretaker, his voice, his memory, his protector. She had to be his strength, even as she was quietly breaking inside. In the beginning, she tried to make sense of what was happening. She read every book she could find on Parkinson's. She talked to specialists. She rearranged their lives, adjusting schedules, limiting stress, removing anything that might confuse or overstimulate Robin. But no matter how much she learned, nothing seemed to fit exactly. Because it wasn't just Parkinson's. There were days when Robin would forget where he was in their home. He'd stand in a hallway, looking lost. Other days, he'd cling to Susan like a frightened child, whispering that something was wrong with his brain, but he didn't know what. I started to feel like I was living in two worlds, Susan later said. One world with the Robin I knew, funny, sweet present, and another world with a stranger who looked like him but was slowly slipping away. She kept smiling for him. She kept pretending that everything was okay, even when she'd cry alone in the bathroom, because he needed stability, not sorrow. He needed comfort, not confusion. And the hardest part, Robin knew. He was aware, painfully aware, that something was happening inside him, that he was losing himself inch by inch, that he was becoming someone he didn't recognize, and that knowledge tormented him. Susan often saw him trying to mask his fear with jokes, trying to protect her with humor. But when the jokes faded, when they were alone at night, he would ask questions that broke her heart. Do you still love me if I can't be funny anymore? What if I forget you one day? What's going to happen to me? There are no answers for those kinds of questions. Only love, only presence, only holding on for one more day. Susan began to adapt. She placed reminders throughout the house. She simplified their routines. She made sure he always knew where she was. Some nights, she slept beside him, holding his hand, afraid he'd wake in terror again. And through it all, she never stopped loving him, not even when he forgot to love himself. She spoke gently when he was agitated. She never corrected him harshly when he got confused. She made it her mission to preserve his dignity, even as the disease tried to strip it away. Every day was a new test of patience, grace, and heartbreak. She once said, loving someone through DLB is like walking through a fog hand in hand. Only you're the only one who can see. But even in that fog, she never let go. What Susan endured is something millions of caregivers face every day. Quiet, unseen heroism. The strength it takes to show up daily, to give without receiving, to carry both hope and grief in the same breath. Susan didn't just fight for Robin. She fought beside him. And when the day finally came that he could no longer fight, she held his hand, not as a nurse, not even as a caretaker, but as a woman who had loved him with her whole heart through the storm, through the silence, through the final breath. Because real love doesn't run when the light fades. It becomes the light. The final goodbye, forgiveness in the darkest hour. Extended. There are no perfect words for goodbye. No right time. No simple way to say, I'll let you go. But when the moment came, Susan Williams faced it with the deepest love a human heart can hold. It was a quiet morning, too quiet, the kind that feels heavy before anything has even happened. Susan had already sensed something shifting in the air in the days before. Robin was more withdrawn, more still. His eyes lingered longer in silence. His smile, when it came, was smaller, as if it were just muscle memory. And then he was gone. Not from the house, not just yet, but from this world. In one moment, the man who had lit up rooms, lifted hearts, and carried burdens he never spoke of, had slipped away. Susan remembers everything about that moment. The stillness, the surreal sense of time freezing, and the impossible weight pressing down on her chest. But she didn't scream. She didn't fall to the floor. Instead, she walked over to him. She knelt beside him. She took his hand, and she began to pray. It wasn't the kind of prayer you say in church. It was raw. It was sacred. It was her soul laid bare before him. I forgive you, she whispered, 50 billion%, with all my heart. You are the bravest man I've ever known. She told him she loved him, over and over. She thanked him for every moment they'd shared, for the way he made her laugh, for how fiercely he had loved her, for the quiet, simple memories, the kind that don't make headlines, but make a life. And she told him it was okay. It was okay to stop fighting, because even though the world saw his decision as a tragedy, she saw it through a different lens, a lens only someone who had walked every step of that path with him could truly understand. Robin didn't give up. He endured longer than most ever could. And in the end, he didn't choose death. He chose release. Release from the confusion, the hallucinations, the shame of not being able to recognize himself, the terror of hurting the people he loved simply by being sick. Susan never blamed him, not for 1 second. Instead, she stood as witness to his bravery, how he fought every single day to hold on, to show up, to smile, even when he was unraveling. She once said, if love alone could have saved him, he would have lived forever. That moment of goodbye, though wrapped in heartbreak, was also wrapped in peace. Because in those final words, Susan gave him everything he needed: forgiveness, freedom, and unconditional love. It was the kind of goodbye most of us fear, but all of us hope for one, where pain gives way to grace and loss becomes love made eternal. She stayed with him long after the paramedics arrived. She held his hand as if holding on to the very last thread of their story together, not to change what had happened, but to make sure he didn't leave alone. Because for Susan, Robin wasn't just a celebrity. He wasn't just a legend. He was her husband, her heart, her home, and no disease, not even one as cruel as DLB, could ever take that away. Breaking the silence, speaking up for the unseen extended. After Robin's death, the world mourned. Fans around the globe lit candles, left flowers, and shared clips of their favorite performances. Social media overflowed with tributes, moments of laughter, joy, and nostalgia. But behind the scenes, Susan Williams was facing a different kind of grief. Not just the loss of her husband, not just the ache of an empty house, but the crushing realization that for months, even years, they had been battling an enemy they never fully understood. and she couldn't stay silent. In the beginning, it was hard to speak. Her voice would break. Her eyes would fill before she could finish a sentence. But something deep inside told her she had to try. Because if they, Robin and Susan, could be caught off guard by something like dementia with Lewy bodies, then so could anyone. I couldn't let what happened to Robin happen in vain, she said. So she started sharing. She spoke to People magazine, opening up not just about Robin's final days, but about the mysterious, terrifying symptoms that had taken over his life. She described the confusion, the misdiagnoses, the helplessness, and the love that held them together through it all. She went on ABC News, not as a widow, seeking sympathy, but as a woman on a mission to shine light on a disease that lives in the shadows, a mission to make the unseen seen. And people listened. Doctors reached out. Families who had lost loved ones to DLB sent letters sharing their stories, many eerily similar. Some had never heard of the disease before Robin. Others had suspected it for years, but lacked the words or support to speak up. Susan's voice became a bridge, connecting isolated pockets of grief and confusion across the country. She began advocating for research. She sat down with neurologists, joined conferences, and partnered with the Lewy Body Dementia Association. Her message was simple: we need to know more. We need to do better. In interviews, she spoke not just of Robin, the celebrity, but Robin the human, the man who asked if she'd still love him, even if he forgot how to be funny, the man who tried to fight until his brain wouldn't let him anymore. That honesty, that raw, vulnerable truth, is what touched people the most. She didn't sugarcoat the pain, but she also didn't let it define her. Instead, she used it to lift others. She reminded caregivers they weren't alone. She helped patients find words for what they were experiencing. She brought visibility to an illness long overlooked. And through it all, she kept Robin's spirit alive, not just through memories, but through movement, through education, through compassion. In a world where silence often surrounds mental health and neurodegenerative disease, Susan's decision to speak out was nothing short of revolutionary. She once said, "If sharing our story saves even one person from the confusion we went through, then it's worth every tear." And maybe that's the most powerful kind of love, the kind that keeps giving, even after the person is gone. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do after heartbreak is to turn your pain into purpose. How to spot DLB signs. Families shouldn't ignore. Extended. If you're over 60 or love someone who is, there's something you need to know. Dementia with Lewy bodies, DLB, often hides in plain sight. It whispers, not shouts. It mimics other illnesses, making it one of the most misdiagnosed neurological diseases today. But families, especially attentive ones, can often see the signs first. Susan Williams wishes she had known what to look for. She wishes someone had told her, this isn't just old age. This isn't just stress. Pay attention. Ask questions. And so today, that's what she wants to give others: a guide, a warning, a lifeline. Here are some of the most common signs of DLB that families should never ignore. 1. Fluctuating alertness and confusion. Unlike Alzheimer's, where memory loss is more gradual and consistent, DLB can feel like a roller coaster. One day, your loved one is fully with you. laughing, talking, remembering. The next, they're disoriented, confused, even unreachable. These shifts can happen multiple times in a single day. Susan remembers Robin going in and out of clarity. One moment, he'd make a joke about the dog. The next, he'd forget we even had one. 2. Vivid visual hallucinations. One of the most striking signs of DLB is seeing things that aren't there, fully formed detailed visions. They might describe people standing in the room, animals on the floor, intruders at the window. But unlike other types of dementia, these hallucinations can occur early, sometimes even before memory issues appear. Robin had moments where he stared into empty corners, whispered to people only he could see. It was heartbreaking. 3. REM sleep behavior disorder. Have you ever heard someone shout, kick, or act out their dreams in their sleep? This isn't just tossing and turning. It's a serious sleep disorder, often tied to DLB, where the brain fails to paralyze the body during deep REM sleep. Patients may punch, kick, scream, or even fall out of bed. Some wake up frightened and confused. Susan remembers sleepless nights watching over Robin, afraid he might hurt himself during these episodes. 4. Parkinsonian symptoms. DLB shares many physical traits with Parkinson's disease. You might notice stiffness in limbs, slower movements, shuffling walk, tremors in hands or fingers. But again, it's the combination of movement and mental symptoms that distinguishes DLB. 5. Sensitivity to medications. One red flag that often surprises doctors. People with DLB can have severe reactions to antipsychotic medications. Instead of calming hallucinations, these drugs can worsen confusion, cause dangerous stiffness, or even put the patient in a catatonic state. Robin experienced this too. Certain medications that should have helped made things worse. What can you do? If any of these signs sound familiar, don't panic, but don't ignore them either. Start by documenting what you see. Keep a daily journal of changes in behavior, mood, movement, and sleep. Bring this to your doctor. Ask specifically about DLB. If needed, seek a neurologist with experience in neurodegenerative disorders. There's no cure yet, but early diagnosis can lead to better symptom management and more time for planning, understanding, and support. You are not alone. DLB affects an estimated 1.4 million Americans. That means there are millions of families out there, just like Susan and Robin once were confused, scared, searching for answers. The first step to helping your loved one isn't solving the problem. It's seeing the signs. It's trusting your instincts. It's asking questions, even the hard ones. Because when it comes to diseases like DLB, silence is the enemy, but awareness is hope. From despair to hope, there is light extended. When Susan Williams first learned about dementia with Lewy bodies, it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff with no bridge in sight. She had just lost the love of her life. She was grieving, angry, confused. The disease had taken Robin away, piece by piece, and for a long time, she thought there was no light left. But slowly, one conversation, one shared story, one compassionate voice at a time, she began to realize there is hope, not the kind that promises a cure tomorrow, but the kind of hope that says you are not alone. And this journey doesn't have to be walked in silence. That kind of hope can change everything. Support begins with understanding. The first step out of despair is education. When Susan began reading about DLB, truly learning its symptoms and stages, something shifted. She understood that what happened to Robin wasn't anyone's fault, not his, not hers, not the doctor's. She began to forgive not just Robin, but herself, and that made room for healing. If you or someone you love is dealing with DLB, know this. Understanding the disease doesn't take away the pain, but it gives it context. It gives you clarity, and with clarity comes courage. Build a village around you. No one should care for a loved one with DLB alone. Susan often said, "This disease isolates people, not just the one who has it, but everyone who loves them." That's why support groups exist. Organizations like the Lewy Body Dementia Association, LBDA, offer online communities, resources, webinars, and even 24/7 hotlines for caregivers and families. You can talk to people who get it, who've seen the hallucinations, navigated the confusion, lived the sleepless nights. There is tremendous comfort in realizing your grief isn't strange. Your fatigue isn't weakness. Your love, your doubts, your exhaustion, they're shared by millions. You don't have to carry it all. Medical care that makes a difference, though. DLB cannot be cured. It can be managed. With the right care team, neurologists, sleep specialists, movement disorder experts, patients can have improved quality of life. Medications can ease symptoms if prescribed with caution. Physical therapy can help with balance and mobility. Speech therapy can aid communication. Routine structure and calm environments go a long way. The earlier the diagnosis, the more time you have to build a personalized care plan. Susan's only regret was not knowing sooner, but she's made it her mission to help others know now, before it's too late. Moments of joy still exist. One of the most powerful things Susan learned was this: even amidst the pain, there are moments worth cherishing. The gentle squeeze of a hand, a sudden smile on a clear day, a fleeting memory that returns however briefly. These moments, she said, they're like little candles in the dark. Families affected by DLB are encouraged to create new ways of connecting through music, touch, nature, even shared silence. Communication may change, but love doesn't need words. Hope is not just a feeling, it's a choice. Susan now dedicates her voice to offering that choice to others. In every speech, every interview, every quiet conversation with a grieving caregiver, she carries this message: you can find light again, not because it erases the darkness, but because it reminds us that we're still alive, still able to love, still able to make meaning, even in the midst of loss. Robin may be gone, but the lessons he left behind, the strength, the vulnerability, the laughter, the tears, they live on in Susan's work. And they live on in every family who, because of his story, finds their own way from despair to light. Robin's real legacy, beyond laughter extended. When most people think of Robin Williams, they think of the laughter, the wild energy, the voices, the unforgettable characters, Mrs. Doubtfire, the genie, John Keating. They think of the stand-up specials that left audiences gasping for air, the late-night talk shows where he'd hijack entire interviews with his brilliance. But for those who knew him best, and for those who now walk the path he unknowingly paved, his legacy is much deeper than laughter. Robin Williams didn't just make people laugh, he made them feel. He made them feel seen, understood, accepted. And perhaps most powerfully, he made them feel less alone. A heart that always looked outward. Robin was the kind of man who, even in a room full of fans, always noticed the one person standing quietly in the back. He visited children in hospitals without press. He performed for U.S. troops overseas, giving joy where there was none. He spoke openly, even awkwardly, about his own struggles, addiction, anxiety, insecurity, because he didn't believe in pretending. Susan once said Robin wasn't trying to be perfect. He was trying to be honest. And that honesty, raw, messy, brave, is what truly bonded him to the world. The role he never auditioned for. In the years following his death, Robin Williams became something unexpected, a face for awareness, a voice for those who can no longer speak, a symbol of how even the brightest lights can be dimmed by invisible battles. It wasn't a role he chose, but it's one he plays even in absence. Thanks to Susan's advocacy and the global attention around Robin's story, dementia with Lewy bodies is now more widely understood. Doctors are getting better at diagnosing it. Families are asking smarter questions. Support networks are growing. Robin may not have known what he was facing in his final days, but by telling his story, his family has turned his suffering into a legacy of clarity, compassion, and change. A legacy written in empathy. Robin's greatest gift wasn't his quick wit or comedic timing. It was empathy. He had a remarkable ability to step into other people's shoes, whether on screen or off. He channeled real emotion into his roles, blending humor with heartbreak in a way that left lasting imprints. Think of Good Will Hunting, the scene where he says, "It's not your fault," over and over, or Dead Poets Society urging students to seize the day. These weren't just lines, they were lifelines. Millions of people found hope in those words. They still do. More than a memory, a movement today. Robin's legacy lives on, not just in film, but in action, in families catching early signs of DLB because of his story, in doctors listening more closely, in caregivers who feel seen, in every act of kindness done in his name. He showed us that humor can be healing, that vulnerability is strength, and that the most powerful performances are those rooted in truth. Robin Williams gave everything he had to his craft, to his loved ones, to his audience. And though he is no longer here to deliver punchlines, his impact resonates in quieter, deeper ways. Remembering Robin, renewing our humanity. Robin's true legacy is not just that he made us laugh, it's that he made us better, more compassionate, more curious, more connected. He reminded us that everyone, even the ones who seem to have it all, might be fighting a battle we can't see. And that kindness, even the smallest kind, can be a light in someone's darkness. So today, we don't just remember Robin Williams as a comedian. We honor him as a teacher, a healer, a human, a message to you. Love while you can extend it. If you've made it this far into Robin and Susan's story, thank you. Thank you for holding space for a truth that is painful but necessary. Thank you for listening, not just with your ears, but with your heart. Because the most important part of this story is not about death, it's about love. Love that shows up in the silence. Love that holds steady in confusion. Love that forgives comforts and refuses to let go even when everything else is slipping away. Susan Williams will tell you, love doesn't fix everything, but it gives you the strength to stay in the room when everything breaks. And maybe that's what this story has been about all along. We are all borrowed time. The truth is, we are all on borrowed time, whether we're young or old, healthy or struggling. None of us knows how many days we get with the people we love, and sometimes we don't realize just how precious those days are until they're gone. Robin's story is a reminder that even the brightest stars fade, that even the strongest minds can falter, that even the people who make the world laugh cry behind closed doors. But it's also a reminder of something more powerful, that it is never too late to love someone better. Don't wait for a diagnosis to pay attention. If you have someone in your life, a spouse, a parent, a neighbor who's acting differently, notice them. Not just with worry, but with warmth. Ask questions. Sit with them. Slow down. Hold their hand. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give is presence. DLB may be rare, but disconnection is not. So many older adults feel invisible, unheard, forgotten. Don't let the people you love become statistics. Let them be stories, a call to compassion. Robin Williams once said, "Everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind, always." Maybe that's the message we all need right now, not just in how we treat strangers, but in how we treat our families, our elders, ourselves. Be kind to the people losing their memories. Be gentle with those who repeat themselves. Be patient with the ones who move a little slower, forget a little more, or struggle to find the words. Because love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, consistent, soft, and sometimes it's just showing up again and again. Let love be the legacy. Robin's life was about more than movies. It was about more than stand-up, more than awards, more than applause. It was about connection, the kind that reaches across generations, across diagnosis, across grief. And his legacy, when all the lights dim, when the final curtain falls, isn't just laughter. It's this simple truth: love while you can. Call your mother, hug your husband, forgive your father, sit beside your friend, visit your neighbor, say the words you've been holding back, share the memory, laugh again, cry if you need to. Just don't wait, because the moments matter, and sometimes they're all we get. Thank you for being here. Thank you for remembering Robin with us. And thank you for carrying forward the most important part of his story, his heart. If this touched you, consider sharing it with someone who might need it. And remember, you are not alone.